Hello everyone and welcome to episode 32 of the SATO Briefing series. Today we're going to be going over the Bell 212 and 412 project that I'm doing for the CeraSim aircraft. So back on episode 31, that's basically around the time that I was kind of just starting into the project. Um, the main focus right now, I've been trying to kind of bounce back and forth between both the 412 and the 212. Then the 412 kind of took over as the main aircraft I was working on and just sticking to the one platform. And then I figured once I was done with the 412, I would move back to the 212. So, in terms of how many aircraft we're going to be doing for either one, I'm trying to keep them around the same in terms of the extra equipment variations. So, right now, just the Bell 412. If I just check my notes here, I've done 10 expansion models so far, just for the Bell 412. Now, those expansion models, just to kind of reiterate, they're either search and rescue and fire or only search and rescue related. So that's kind of been my main focus for the add-ons for the CeraSim aircraft. That'll be the same way for the 212 you see in front of me here. Um, they'll all have their own small equipment variations and things like that for particular operators. Maybe they operate special tanks or different equipment setups on their helicopters. That's basically what all these expansion models are for the CeraSim helicopters. So, for those of you that are maybe seeing this and don't have the CeraSim helicopters at all, the 412 or the 212, basically those aircraft came completely stock in a stock configuration. Basically, everyone I think prefers them as a slick, which there's no equipment packages or anything on them, except for I believe there's like a radar bubble on the nose for both the 212 and 412s. That's kind of basically it in terms of your basic equipment packages that these came with. Which I mean, it's good as a base product, but I mean, there's so many different variations of both these helicopters out there. And me just focusing on firefighting and rescue. Um, I've like I said, I've just added a ton. It seems like of extra uh, small details and things like that. So one of the first modifications I did for them for both of these is kind of give them the more modern kind of appearance. So what exactly did that entail? That entailed a lot of these firefighting and rescue versions have a high skid conversion on them as an option. So I've done that to the stock aircraft. I've extended the landing gear for it to basically give it that high skid look. Also, I think I went over this in episode 31, but the BLR Aerospace Fast Fin is a pretty commonplace modification that's seen on a lot of Bell 412 and 212 helicopters in the current time period. And that is this um, different looking tail as opposed to the full tail that you would see on the stock versions. A lot of the newer modifications for these helicopters, you get this fast fin, which increases the tail rotor effectiveness on the helicopters. So some still operate the standard tail. Um, a lot of them don't, though. A lot of them have gone to this tail. So, in order for me to kind of update them to a more modern look, that's kind of one of the other physical updates that I did to almost all of these. So, like I said, it's on both the 212 and the 412. So, and then, like I said, there's going to be various equipment packages. Like you see this one here for Valhalla helicopters flown down in Australia. Um, this has a simplex model tank on it. Some of them will have other equipment, things like FLIR pods and um, rescue hoists and things like that. I've also added some of these. I should say some of these. A lot of these actually have a bubble window, which I have also equipped on a number of these helicopters. Again, not all of them have it, but a lot of them in firefighting and search and rescue do. So I've added those to these. And then each one of these models will have some of these libraries for these operators are multiple. So you'll have different configurations of the helicopters, but you'll have same operator liveries on maybe a few helicopters. Valhalla, as an example, will have 2 different variations in the 212, one with a tank and one without. Because sometimes they fly with the tank option, and the other times they fly with, the bucket option or whatever their contract may be. So that's basically kind of what we're doing with both of these helicopters. The 412 right now, I've just finished with Kestrel. Um, Maybe I'll jump into that helicopter right now and I can kind of show. So this is one of the 412s that I just completed. This is one flown by Kestrel down in Australia. I've just finished doing the custom tank for Kestrel and attaching it to their particular variation of the 412, which this is one of the versions that does not have the fast fin, but it does have a rescue hoist and some of the other equipment. Like it says, it has the bubble nose and stuff like that. But this is kind of some of those different model variations I was talking about. There's some models that vary very, very little from each other, and then there's others that do. Like I said, like this model flown by Kestrel has their own tank model and stuff like that. So a lot of these modifications are related to their operators' specific equipment packages. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with a lot of these, or these aircraft in particular. So with with the way that they came, it was great to have, like, you could just have the liveries for them. But this, I feel, expands what you could be doing and how the helicopters would look in the proper configuration for those particular operators in this sense. So it kind of adds just an extra bit of, I would say, maybe immersive feeling, or maybe even like some people that see them very often, stuff like that. You don't just have the livery now. You have the helicopter that looks exactly how the one you see all the time in your area, or the agency that you fly for, or agency you're familiar with, or company. That's kind of why I wanted to go about this. And these helicopters, in my opinion, are the best ones out there to represent that. CeraSim does great helicopters. So, as those of you may know, I did stuff for the Firehawk conversions. And these kind of will go along with them because a lot of these operators actually operate not only the Bell 212, they operate the 412 and the Firehawk. So it's kind of cool with CeraSim because you'll have the Firehawk mod, and then you'll have these eventually when they come out too. So, and that's kind of a cool addition in my opinion because they're such well done helicopters, and me just kind of adding these extra little bits of equipment and stuff like that to them just kind of I feel elevates them just a little bit more. Plus, I'm doing some cosmetic updates to them to make them a little more um, updated. Like I said, these new expansion models are going to have PBR attached to them. So the stock ones didn't. They still looked fantastic anyway, but since P3D has that available to it, I'm also adding that to it as well. So some other small additional details that they're both going to have on these helicopters. They're both going to have. I'm going to try and put the FLIR cameras from P3D in them, as well as the hoist system. For those of you who don't know, the P3D has built-in FLIR cameras and rescue hoists built into them, and you can attach that to the helicopters. So I'm going to try and implement those once I'm finally done with modeling and repaints and all that. Then I'll get all of the equipment stuff that I'm adding to these to function. So one of those things is the tanks, as you see on these. They all have a snorkel. And if you've seen so far, all of the snorkels are in the stowed configuration. One of the things that I'm going to be trying to do is attaching the snorkels function to a switch in the cockpit, which will probably be attached to one of the lights. I think is the easiest way to do this, since I'm restricted to what I can and can't do to the model to protect the CeraSim product. So in order for these to work, just to kind of reiterate this, I've kind of done this with other helicopters like the Sky Crane. you need the base product in order to get these to work. So in order for me to protect that product, I'm only allowed to do certain things to the external model only. So I can't be adding switches or things like that to the internal model and stuff like that, because I'd also have to give the external or the internal model along with it, which is, you're giving too much for free, if that makes sense. So, and this is being done to kind of protect the product overall, make sure you have to purchase it and all that stuff. So the snorkels you switch the light on, one of these lights on, and it'll go from the stowed configuration to the down position for use for firefighting. Otherwise, it'll stay in the stowed position. So that's one of the things I'm going to be working on. Some of these also have the firefighting pulse lights. Those of you who probably know what I'm talking about. The alternating lights that you see fairly typically with firefighting aircraft. I have implemented that on most of these helicopters that have them. There's two different types. There's a faster set of blinking lights, and then there's a much slower sort of set. So that's also going to be coming on these. I have not modeled a bucket for these, because essentially I figure that a lot of people that'll have these are going to be flying with Firefighter X. So in that sense, the standard bucket that comes with Firefighter X, you can just attach right to the helicopter, and that bucket's already dynamic with how it works and everything like that. So there wasn't really a need for me to model versions with the buckets on them. Mainly, my focus was doing the ones with the tanks. That's basically why you'll see no custom buckets for these, as I have with other models. So, and I opted to do all of these tanks and everything for the CeraSim helicopters, because those who may remember, I think I went over this in episode 31, that I did a freeware release of the hover control Bell 412 and the the ones done by George Arana, the Bell 212s done by George Arana. And those were great models. They're a little dated at this point now, but the opportunity came along where I had the ability to be able to modify the payware CeraSim helicopters, and in my opinion, they've come out looking fantastic with just the little bits of modifications to them. Like I said, it's mostly their aircraft. I've just add little tiny bits of equipment and changed little tiny things here and there, just like I said, to update them. So I'm pretty happy with how these are coming out. Hopefully everyone else will be really happy with these expansion models. Now, I do have, since I'm doing fire and rescue, I'm also toying with the idea of doing some other releases later on that are involving other platforms, and operators. So generally speaking, I don't like to try and stray too far away from the firefighting aspect of it, because I've been pulled away into military projects and things like that, and it ends up taking way longer than I really want to, and it takes me away from my main focus, which is the firefighting stuff. And I will eventually probably do some military rescue variants, and some civilian ones, but they're older, like retro, I guess you could say, retro Bell 412 and 212 configurations. So maybe operators that don't fly these particular platforms anymore, or their older configurations and things like that that were flown. Those are kind of other options I'll do a little bit later on at some point, but I want to get these modern configurations out, what I consider modern, which everyone's probably seen. In my opinion, I was saying this in our Discord server, that basically if it's a helicopter that was seen in the last 5 or so years, chances are it's probably going to be represented in this package in some sense. There may not be exact replicas of certain configurations, but there might be some that are close enough to where if you have your own custom liveries, you can throw them on or move them around to other ones if you wanted to. There's going to be a lot of options. In other words, like I was saying, just like I said, the 412 by itself has 10, I think it is 10 or 11 expansion models by itself. The 212 isn't much further behind it. I haven't moved a lot of those things over to it yet, but a lot of the same modifications that are on the 412 will be on the 212s. So expect right around the same amount of configurations for the 212 as well. So as far as anything else that I'm going to be adding to them, there's not a whole lot of extras really. It's just the configurations of the external models that you're going to be getting in the expansion pack, and obviously the textures. So that's kind of all we're looking at doing with these. And I've had some questions on whether there's going to be like like changes to the cockpit, like getting glass cockpits and stuff like that. And no, there is not going to be any interior modifications. They're just going to be the stock interiors that they came with. Because, like I said, in order for me to do a full overhaul like that, you have to get all the gauges and all that stuff have to be given out, which you can't do for a payware product. This is the only way to protect their product, as I've said before. So we're just doing external models, and I've done this before with, I think this is the third or fourth payware aircraft that I've done modifications to like this, where I have permission from the original authors or company to modify their aircraft, but it's only the external models. And that's for this same reason. So with these, the 212, 412, the S64, and the Firehawk mods, those are all kind of run the same way. So what'll happen when these release is you'll get the external models. You'll have to take the files that are not included and basically build your own. The rest of you have to copy all the files over to these new files or new folders. So that kind of makes it. It's a little more involved than I like making certain add-ons, but the fact of the matter is, I mean, these are payware. So if you have them, and I feel like the models themselves, it adds to it adds to them. So it's kind of a cool addition. It's like maybe you got tired of flying them before for a while, and then you're like, oh well, it's kind of like looking at the same platform over and over again. There's nothing really. It kind of gets dull, I guess you can say. Maybe that's just a me thing, but I'm sure there's other people that are like, it looks close enough to the ones that I see all the time or I like to fly, but it's not quite that or not quite there. And you get kind of maybe, like I said, you get kind of bored of seeing it. So this kind of, like I said, it updates them. It brings new life to them, and you get new expansion models and like maybe it's like I said, it'll represent the aircraft that you see specifically, or you've flown in, or whatever. That's kind of one of my big things about doing a lot of these modification packs like this is, people see these platforms all the time. They're like, oh, that's my helicopter, or that's the one that's based at my local airport, or I've seen this one, or this one dropped water near my house, that type of thing. That's the kind of cool aspect I feel like when I first started doing a lot of these projects, seeing them working out in the field and then coming home, you know, later in the week and doing a repaint because it was a new operator that I had never seen before and stuff like that. This is kind of like one of those culminating things because the Huey platform itself is so popular, and the 212s and 412s are, again, they're used by so many companies and agencies. Um, I was glad I was able to get permission by CeraSim to be able to do these modifications. So I'm pretty excited, if you can't tell, about being able to do these. And I'm a huge rotor head fanatic, so I love helicopters. Arguably, maybe a slightly more than fixed wing, but I mean, it's I'm still pretty passionate about aviation in general. But the helicopters just have that little extra interest in mine, um, for whatever reason. But hopefully, I'm hoping. I've had a lot of questions on the Facebook forum in particular. Do I have a set release date? I do not, but I'm hoping that they won't be too far into 2026. I know that's still a vague kind of answer, but like I said, I'm doing 2 aircraft at once. Now people know that generally I tend to work on more than one project at once, but I'm working in them in conjunction with one another. So it's like maybe this is taking a long time for some people compared to some of my other projects, and that's kind of why is because I'm doing them together. And one will release, and then the other one will release right after it. So it's like, maybe in January, just for example, and sometime it's like the Bell 212 will launch on like 1 week. I'll give it 1 week to kind of smooth out, and then the next week the 412 will come out. So that's kind of how I'm looking at trying to do it. They'll both be done at the same time and both be tested at the same time, but I'm going to release them a little spread out so that if there are any issues after launch, I can address them separately and not try to get, if there is a problem, trying to do both at the same time. I tried not to do that. So, and those of you who don't know, I try to stay on top of error reports and things like that. So, I'm hoping that nothing is wrong with these when they come out, and it's fairly easy for people to be able to just drop in and rebuild and build up the add-ons so that they appear in their sim and work fine. So um, that's kind of all I have to really say about about these right now. Um, like I said, I don't have a final number of how many operators or exactly how many models there are going to be. But like I said, there's at least 10 right now for the 412, and I think the 212 has six or seven right now. And like I said, by the time I get done with the 212s will catch up to where the 412s are. They'll be very close. Like I said, I'm trying to keep them uh, even in terms of equipment options for them. So I think that's it. Thanks for tuning into this one, and tune to the next one.